welcome to another episode of Hackers, Misadventures, and Scale Modeling Feature Friday. Today we're going to be doing the Curtis P6E. Now, I had done the P6E P35, but there was no previous aircraft before that, and I was going to do the P36. But the P36 has a previous aircraft before that, and that was the P6. Now, there isn't very many videos, so I'm going to be doing like a slideshow type thingy here. And I'll read off the history of the P36. Then we'll watch the one video from the U.S. Air Force Museum on that aircraft. So, and I'm also going to tell you what kits are available of this aircraft in the various scales. So, let's have a go and we'll talk about the aircraft. So, the Curtis P.E. Hawk was based on the existing P-1B and the P-2 fighters, and the P-6 soon became the primary fighter for the U.S. Army Air Corps in the early 30s. During the 20s, the Curtis Aircraft partnered with other aerospace companies to make evolving aircraft for the national competitions that are being held. These aircraft soon caught the attention of the U.S. military when the P6E model with surface radiators won second place in 1927 at the National Air Races in Spokane, Washington, with an impressive speed of 201 miles an hour. Now that's going along quite quickly in them days. U.S. Army Air Corps became interested in Curtis producing pursuit planes that would eventually become the P6E Hawk, one of the most beautiful biplanes ever built and one of the most well-known Curtis fighters to this day. It should be noted that the Curtis line of fighters carried the Hawk name from the P-1 to the P-36, and the P-40s carried on that tradition with names such as Warhawk. Sometimes the P-36 carried the name Tomahawk as well. The P-6 was well armed for its time with two 30 caliber machine guns, which they had never fired a shot in anger, and it was powered with the Curtis V1570 Conqueror engine with 600 horsepower, and with that engine it could reach a maximum speed of 204 miles an hour with a cruising speed of 167 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest biplanes of the period. It could reach altitudes of 24,400 feet and could outperform any biplane during its time. In 1932, Captain Reuben Moffett, in a heavily modified P6E, which featured a supercharged Conqueror engine, set a world speed record of 266 miles per hour at an altitude of 25,000 feet, flying from Dayton, Ohio to Washington, D.C., which at the time was quite an accomplishment. The P6E Hawk also caught the eye of the U.S. Navy, who wanted a navalized version that would soon become the F6 Hawk, which had the same Curtis Conqueror engine. The Curtis F7C followed, which was powered by a 450 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R1300B Wasp that was a 9-cylinder air-cooled radio engine. The F-11C Goshawk would follow thereafter. There were other versions that were with Radio 8 engines too, that were exported to the likes of Cuba, China, and Dutch East Indies. But one P6S with a modified Conqueror engine was sold to Imperial Japan. Oddly enough, the Kawasaki Ki-10 Perry looked awful similar to the P6E on many levels. One would think that the Japanese had outright copied the P6S they had bought. Today, only one original example of the P6E remains at the U.S. Air Force Museum. The aircraft was sold as surplus by the military. It was bought and donated to the museum in 1936. The Department of Aviation Technology at Purdue, who painstakingly restored it, and now appears in the colors of Captain Ross G. Holt, commanding officer of the 17th Pursuit Squadron, 1st Pursuit Group, based in Siegfried Field, Michigan in 1933. So, those are a little bit of history on my part, because I can't seem to find a video that tells you anything other than the one towards the end. I will be, hopefully the pictures I showed you gives you kind of an idea of what's going on and etc. Now we did a little bit of history and some other films. Let's watch this little documentary about the P6E Hawk that's being preserved at the U.S. Air Force Museum. So here we go.
This is the P6E Hawk behind me. It's the 6th in the series. That's what this 6 stands for. The E was the E model of this. So that's
this back down here
the other
again.
before. The P stands for pursuit. Today we say fighter, or F, like an F-22, or F-35. This would say P6E, a first P6E. This is the only original P6 left in the world, the only one. We have it on display at the National Museum of the United States Air Force. So someone can come to this museum and see what interwar pursuit aviation was like firsthand by looking at this aircraft. And they're going to learn quite a bit when they look at it. I'll say the SPAN 13 with the P6E, they look an awful lot alike. But then when you start looking at the differences, you'll see
Notice
that this
the P12
has
in the background.
all steel fuselage.
That's another one I want to be doing.
Fabric. The wings are wood, which again is covered by fabric, but the SPAD is all wood. So this fighter is much stronger, and the engine is a different engine. It's the Curtiss B-1570 Conqueror. It was the engine that made this aircraft so successful. It took the speed of this airplane, just the cruising speed, from about 170 to about 180. The top speed, by the end of the series of the Hawk fighters, it was reaching at the 200 mile per hour, which 1932, 34, 35, that's moving along in a good clip. This aircraft was originally assigned to the 33rd Pursuit Squadron of the 8th Pursuit Group, which was at Langley Field in Virginia. However, we have painted it from the other squadron that received P6Es. That was the 17th Pursuit Squadron at Selfridge Field in Michigan. We chose this specifically because, first off, it's much more colorful. The 17th Pursuit Squadron, their emblem had a white owl diving. So, of course, the clever people who decided to put the paint scheme on this in the 1930s, they take this back on the wheels and they show little owl got to tear someone apart. Over time, they began to add things to it. They began adding an oxygen system so the pilot would be able to breathe. And they also added a drop tank under the fuselage. When they added that, it began to throw the center of gravity off and change the weight and the dynamics of the aircraft. Unfortunately, the aircraft was designed to do one thing, and as it got to the point where it was doing the next thing, the attachments to hold the bottom wings to the aircraft weren't strong enough to hold the extra forces when the aircraft would start diving and throwing itself around, so the wings would come off. As a result, a number of these aircraft hit the ground, crashed. And there were only about 20 or so left toward the end of the 1930s. And the Army, rather than spend the money on refurbishing an obsolescent aircraft, the Roosevelt administration had already decided that we were probably going to be involved in another war. The war clouds were over Europe, so the Roosevelt administration took these aircraft and gave them to the National Youth Administration, which was part of the WPA. And the National Youth Administration and aeronautics schools took them and they used them as trainers for mechanics, preparing for the Second World War in 38 and 39. The reason this airplane survived is because it went to one of those schools to train mechanics. There are no others left. The others were either destroyed over time or disposed of over time. The good thing is we have this one. A man from Alabama, a man named Edmund Perkins, actually procured the aircraft with the specific goal of giving it to the Air Force Museum. And he did that. He made a deal with the aeronautical school at Purdue University. They restored the aircraft, and in 1963, they donated this aircraft to the museum. So at 1 million visitors a year, you can do the math pretty quickly and figure out quite a few Americans have gotten to see this wonderful airplane because of the effort of a few people to save it. It takes me back, it runs me back almost 100 years and gives me a personal context. In addition, it is just...
It's almost 100 years. What are you talking
about? You
about?
do take it outside, which isn't very often, to clean it and do some move other aircraft around. You can kind of put yourself back onto an airfield in 1934, 35, and the historical context becomes much clearer.
Now, in model kits, there isn't very many kits of the P6. Now, we have in 1/72nd scale, we have the monogram kit that's been around for quite a while. Now, it's a nice little kit, lacks detail because I built it, and it comes with the markings, the 17th pursuit marking on it. Now, in 1/48 scale, there's a couple. There's the Aurora kit. There's also classic airframes. And I believe there's one more. Oh yeah, Lindbergh kits. Those are the three kits that you can get in 1/72nd scale. Now the only kit you can get in 1/48 scale, sorry. The only kit you can get in 1/32nd scale, well, there's actually two kits. I have the vacuum form one from, I believe, Contrail. It might be Contrail, might be the other guy. But there is I believe it's a resin kit from Silver Wings. It could be resin, could be mold injected. I haven't looked really. But that's the only two that's in 32nd scale. So for the Goshawk, just out of your curiosity, there's about 3 kits. 2 or 3 kits. There's the monogram kit. Of course, it's another oldie. There's also the Lindbergh kit. And there's also Lindbergh kit in 48 scale. And there's also the Goshawk in 1/48 scale by Classic Airframes. And I don't believe there's one in 32nd scale, though there might be one in vacuum form. Now, I know that there's a 1/32nd scale version of the Curtiss Hawk, or Curtiss naval plane, that was the one that preceded the Goshawk, but it has retracting landing gear, and that one's done by monogram. Now, I'm pretty sure there was someplace along the line somebody did a conversion of that, but don't quote me on it. I'd have to look it up. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that. I did my best doing my first video of make my own documentary out of what I could find. So please be gentle on your comments. I'd like to hear what I did right and what I did wrong, but other than that, I did my best. So, as always, I'm sorry, I just woke up this morning trying to get this done before the kids get up. I hope you have a nice day, and remember, every build is an adventure, so go make it awesome, and we'll see you later. And bye.